Hello and welcome to The Big Debate. I'm Kim Kabadeli. You and I have been robbed, but the thieves are not tsotsis in balaclavas. They are businessmen and politicians in designer suits. In the past decade in South Africa, white-collar criminals and corrupt politicians have stolen as much as 300 billion rand from taxpayers, a sum of money that could have built a new house for every homeless person, along with 1,000 state-of-the-art high schools. Most of the culprits are still walking amongst us, earning salaries or winning tenders. Why are they not in prison? Where is our money? Today on The Big Debate, we ask, are we serious about tackling corruption? I'm joined by Obed Bapela, that's the Deputy Minister in the Presidency. Freni Janwala is the former Speaker of Parliament and now with the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. Oliver Josie of the Competition Commission, Bongi Mlangeni of Corruption Watch, and investigative journalist Barry Sargent. In our audience, we have members of Parliament, government officials, business people, and community groups from across Gauteng, all of whom are interested in dealing with corruption. Welcome to you all. You can also make your voice heard in the debate. Send us your comments by SMS, you can tweet us or post on our Facebook page. Now, before we start our debate, take a look at this.
Some of our largest companies were built using corruption and collusion. Cecil Rhodes, the founder of De Beers, used his influence as Prime Minister to beat the competition. The firm colluded with others for more than a century to keep diamond prices and profits artificially high. When government announced tenders to build soccer stadiums in 2006, the plan was to get the best value for money. But instead of competing, the construction companies made secret deals to push up their prices and share the extra profit. They stole over 5 billion rands. Their penalty? A fine of just 1.5 billion rands in a settlement with the Competition Commission. No one was sent to prison, and the companies are still winning tenders. The Matsafeni community sold a big plot of land very cheaply for the construction of the Mbombela Stadium. In meetings with government and the construction company Basil Reed, they were promised new housing, running water and more. Local journalist Tom Nkosi questions how Basil Reed won the contract.
A specific company, which is outside of the municipality, was appointed in order to do an adjudication of this specific tender. And now what was not declared, for example, is that one of the directors of this specific company which adjudicated on this matter also had a relationship with the company which eventually won the tender.
A decade later, the stadium is there, but the Matsafeni community hasn't received the full price for its land, and many local residents live without basic services. Jimmy Muhlala, an ANC whistleblower who tried to expose corruption in the project, was expelled by the party. Later, he was murdered.
Basically, the community and the beneficiaries, they feel very much let down and hurt down by the whole deal, because as you can see, there's a state-of-the-art stadium and yet they still live under dire conditions.
Iman Milanzi was a construction worker on the stadium and now lives in a mud house, making some spare change fixing cell phones.
All the promises that were supposed to materialize never took place, even right up to today. The only thing that we were looking for was the provision of sanitation and the upgrading or the building of roads and water.
Basil Reed is one of the 15 companies fined by the Competition Commission. Their fine was 95 million rands, less than a 30th of their annual income. Richard Spoor is an attorney who represents the community.
There is an attempt to try and take away this land from this community. It's a very difficult battle. It involves court actions where the community is quite poorly placed because we don't have resources for advocates to fight difficult and lengthy legal battles. We are bogged down in a very ugly and difficult battle against very well-resourced sponsors.
The money stolen by the construction cartel is a drop in the ocean of corruption and price fixing in South Africa. In 2007, our biggest food companies were found guilty of fixing bread prices. They had been stealing from consumers for 10 years before they were brought to book. Much of the corruption involves government officials. In 2013, Auditor General Terence Nombembe identified almost 30 billion rands of irregular expenditure, much of which is linked to tender rigging. Public Services Minister Lindiwe Sisulu recently established an anti-corruption bureau. And in 2013, President Zuma assured us that the fight against corruption continues to be intensified in the public sector. But public confidence in these efforts is low. Every day a new story hits the headlines. Few top politicians are prosecuted. Those who are jailed get out early. Shabir Sheikh served just 2 years of a 15-year sentence for corruption in the arms deal. Democratic South Africa has lost as much as 400 billion rands to corruption. That's enough to build housing, schools and hospitals for everyone in the country. So how serious is the government in dealing with the problem? For the community of Mbombela, it's too little, too late.
I would just ask them to take the interest of the community at heart. I'll also ask them to stop stealing and telling lies and making false promises.
Obed Papela, Deputy Minister in the Presidency. Construction companies stole 5 billion rand from us. They get a small little fine, a slap on the wrist really. Politicians, they go to jail, they are linked to the ANC, and then a few months later, they are released on some sort of a medical parole. How can you expect us to take you seriously when you say that you're fighting corruption as government?
Well, corruption is indeed a serious matter that society must stand and fight together and then ensure that we clean it out. Because if we don't, it's going to be a cancer and an elephant that we can no longer destroy. But there are laws also that are here in the country. In the case of the construction companies, I hope the Competition Commission will be able to give a lead as to why they went into that settlement as is, because people have been saying they are the biggest cheaters, and why do we allow it to then happen in the manner in which we do? But
yeah,
they
but
went
you talk
for the
about
law.
laws. You talk about laws, right? Use the same laws then to get the money back from the construction companies and make them pay extra. They only literally paid a third of what they actually stole from us.
I agree with you totally. 1.5 billion rand paying back, having cheated 5 billion rands was little. The perception then grows in society that we are sort of very, very meek when it comes to dealing with corruption.
And the perceptions around your comrades who are released a few months after they've been incarcerated?
Well, also there's also the legal processes. We fought for democracy in South Africa, and we said that the democratic rights of every individual must be enshrined. Did they go stock-free? We may say so, but then they used loopholes or they used mechanisms in the law that allows that if you have terminal illness, can be proven, be whoever you are, irrespective of the name that you carry or the position that you carry in society, then obviously they use that, and it was legally and within the law itself.
Bongi, do you buy that?
Well, what is clear is that corruption and collusion are simply a conspiracy against the public. That is very clear. We expect more from this government. We expect that this government should be held accountable, and it should act always in the interests of the public. We are not satisfied with what we are seeing so far, and we are expecting that both on the side of the private sector and on the side of the public sector, more can be done to fight corruption.
Oliver Josie, they stole 5 billion rand. They were made to pay a third of that. That's like saying to a bank robber, oh, we've caught you, but you can keep a third of the money. There's something seriously wrong with that.
The fines that we levied against construction firms were punitive in nature to change the behavior.
But we still know that what they do, everybody knows what these companies will budget for these fines. So they haven't really felt much of the pain. And in fact, we don't know while we sit here if they're not busy colluding in a dark room somewhere and bid rigging yet again.
It's not just the commission that polices behavior. It, for example, you know, the police and the NPA. You'd find that other offences are also committed as well. For example, fraud, money laundering as well. And that's one of the reasons why, for example, the Orcs are also doing investigations into the construction sector as well.
All right. Frene Chinwala, recently in a newspaper, it was reported that you shed tears at corruption. Why was that?
it wasn't that corruption, but that the growing poverty and the division between the wealthy and the poor in this country. And that given the long struggle people went here to get their freedom, why were they still living in these poor conditions? For example, once the migrant labor system was ended, why did we not insist on the mining companies building housing for families instead of upgrading a hostel? You see, it's this half-hearted thing. So many public servants resign, and it's not insisted that their resignation should not be accepted until the disciplinary proceedings have been completed, and we need to be much stricter. I'm glad we're focusing on the bribe givers. Too often we focus on some little clerk somewhere who might have taken, but also what's wrong with civil society? Why are we not boycotting companies? Now, the Treasury has given a lead. They've published a long list of companies that are now prohibited from tendering. I wish now that they would publish the names of the directors of those companies. It's not easy to find.
Okay. On the point that she makes of it, I mean, we tend to look at the little guy and avoid the bigger elephants in the room, who we should be actually tackling when it comes to corruption.
Well, when it comes to government also, there are new laws that have been introduced. And I think there's this law that the president is still going to assent into an act, the Public Administration Corruption Act. What it says that public servants should no longer do business with companies that are having businesses with government. And you would get 5 years if you are found as a public servant in that particular space. They need not to be in directorships or shareholding of those particular companies. So that as a public servant, you must be seen as saving and working for the people.
Have you stopped doing business with the construction companies that stole $5 billion from us?
We're waiting for the processes that then
You're not buying it.
Definitely. I mean, Ziki, they were found guilty, and then they paid a fine, and according to the law in which they were charged under. So if you are found and then you are charged in a particular law, and then the law doesn't prohibit you from still doing business.
Barry, help me out. Are we making progress in corruption? I'm hearing a lot of platitudes.
No, I think there's a fundamental issue here. The law enforcement process has been broken down, particularly over the last 15 years. And I'm talking about the SAPS, the Hawks, the NPA, even the courts. And the main agent in that breaking down has been private sector, especially lawyers. If you go today to Sandton, the highest and the fanciest skyscrapers are owned by lawyers. Lawyers are doing a lot of things they shouldn't be doing. And I mean, I can name names, but this is a family show, and I don't want to get anyone into trouble, especially myself.
Yeah.
So we need the law enforcement process to come back into line, and there must be a will to take on. It's so easy to expose problems in the government sector. The more insidious agent, the more dangerous agent is the private sector. The corporates and banks and other vested interests manipulate the media. They threaten you and they manipulate your bosses, and it comes down to money and advertising and so on.
Okay.
So the media in South Africa has to realign itself as well.
As well. All right. After the break, we hear from the shopkeeper who spilled the beans on the bread price fixing scandal, and we ask if people who steal from the poor should go to jail. You're watching The Big Debate. Welcome back to The Big Debate. We are discussing corruption. Now, 7 years ago, Imran Mukadam was a shopkeeper in Elsie's River in Cape Town. In 2006, he noticed that several bakeries put their prices up at the same time by the same amount, and he was unable to negotiate the usual discounts. He smelt a rat, and he's here with us today. What made you suspicious? What made you suspicious?
Well, it was obvious that the way the price increases was being implemented, that this was an obvious case of collusion. And I had been following the Competition Commission on the milk price fixing saga.
What were they doing exactly? Explain it to us.
Well, they were getting together in dark, smoke-filled rooms and making deals amongst each other on specifically the price of bread, the basic price of bread. But more importantly, they were getting at these smaller businesses. So it's small business, small bread distributors and small shopkeepers would not be able to negotiate a discount anymore.
And these were big companies. Who are these companies?
Well, this is Premier Foods, Pioneer Foods and Tiger Brands. They feed our children.
Yeah.
So to think that these people that we put so much trust in is actually the ones that's robbing us.
What happened to you? Because it's not easy being a whistleblower.
My business was basically sabotaged. It's taken us a long road. It's been 2006. We've been in and out of court. And this year, 2013, we won in the Constitutional Court the right to implement a claim for damages against these companies.
Here we hear from a whistleblower. We're told if you see corruption, if you know of corruption, go and blow the whistle, report the people. It's the mantra of our politicians. And yet people are victimized. And those companies are still operating. I still see Sasco Bread and Blue Ribbon in the shops, Obed Papela.
Well, the issue of corruption also is big money involved in it. Where as Barry was saying, that the lawyers are paid well. And then we also have to look at capacitating the police, the investigation unit, and resourcing them adequately, and recruiting the best minds into the police to can deal with this forensic element of investigating corruption.
It's not just a question of capacity. It's a question of political will.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's about people just thinking that it is okay to steal from the public and take that money, put it in their private pockets, and that there is impunity. They know that they will get away from it. But I want to commend people like Imran, people who take a stand and say, I'm going to fight this. We need more of people like him.
Obed, she talks about political will. Do we have the leadership to take this seriously? We have a president who is still to face over 700 charges. We have Nkandla in every newspaper in the country. How do we take you seriously as the presidency, that you will take this seriously?
Well, let's allow the issue of Nkandla to be concluded between the public protector and... The report is not yet released. The report is not yet released. And indeed, in that report, I fully agree and concur that we still need to know, besides the security features, that is another matter, who benefited, how much did they inflate the process, and what measures are going to be taken once we know who has done that to reclaim back the money. Quite a number of business people are defrauding government daily. A chair that is costing 5 rand, when they then give quotations, they'll get 70 rand or 150 rand and so forth.
For every briber, there's a bribee. For every corrupt tender, there's somebody who approved it.
And a corruptor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In this particular case, I understand what you're saying about needing to wait for processes to take place. Fine, fair enough. But do you understand why they're booing you?
Well, the issue is that it's taking longer probably because, corruption is a very complex and tedious process. It's not easy to investigate.
They're booing you again.
It's unlike theft. You get caught stealing a bread, you can be charged immediately, and then tomorrow you are in court. But the corruption, you have to have investigation because there's collusion.
We can always hide behind long processes. We can say this. But the public must do more than applaud. Why are they not acting on those issues? We pioneered globally the biggest boycott movement in the world. And now we're doing nothing. We're blaming other people. Why don't we boycott these people? Why don't we... Who do we boycott?
Who do we boycott? Do we boycott the bread companies, the construction companies? Do we boycott our government, which is not serious about
It's a bit more difficult to boycott the government.
That's what I'm thinking.
But we should also look carefully at who are the directors of these companies. Put them into prison.
Okay. Yes. Alfred Motsi, you went to Nkandla to go and hand over a dossier or an investigation that you'd done into corruption in Rustenburg.
Actually, we first started at Luthuli House, knocking at their doors, deputy minister, the president, deputy president, SG of the ANC and everybody. But honestly speaking, the person who took us serious at that particular time was President Jacob Zuma, when he said, Alfred, please bring Mos Phakwe and the others to my house in Nkandla. We sat there, we gave him everything. That's when he brought the late Minister Sicelo Hikeka to Rustenburg. But what is surprising is that immediately after that, my colleague Mos Phakwe was killed. But the dossier that myself and Mos Phakwe prepared, it was never investigated. Then,
well, just to give us very quickly a sense of what the corruption was about.
The mayor was stealing land, selling it to his buddies, stealing municipal vehicles, stealing almost everything. And we had proof. When they realized that we were seriously coming strongly after them, then that's when they wanted to kill me and Mos Phakwe. So I had to run away from Rustenburg. And unfortunately, Mos Phakwe, because he was an easy target, he was putting Jacob Zuma's posters. Immediately when he arrived at his house, that's when the bodyguard of the mayor shot him in his driveway.
All right. Even in a case where someone does what they are told to do, this is the result of it. I wouldn't want to be a whistleblower, let me tell you now, Obed.
Well, you should encourage people to be whistleblowers. There are quite a number of arrests recently of prominent people in the ANC that have been arrested. Are we acting on those? And they have been in the newspapers, you know. And obviously a person is presumed innocent until found guilty. And then they have been published, their photos are all over. ANC does not interfere. But obviously there are incidences where factionalism, unfortunately, in certain parts of the country, in our organization, those who might be incorrupt, they will then collude amongst themselves and show therefore that they protect the others. And it's some things that we need to unearth and then deal with.
All right, let's hear what the audience thinks. People from Bombela, anyone who wants to talk to me?
If you wrong the company, you are suspended. What concerns me is that in Bombela, people were only fined to pay. And that payment that they didn't help the society with anything. It goes back to the very people who are corrupting our monies.
Thank you. Oliver, that's a good idea, right? You with the Competition Commission, I know you don't make the law, but don't you think it would be better if those fines were actually taken back to the communities that were actually defrauded?
Yeah, I think the money indirectly, does go back to the community in a way of infrastructure development. The fines go to the National Treasury, and that becomes a fiscus for the following year. And that money does get distributed to the provinces. The Act does, to some extent, restrict the tribunal, because the Act does say that, you've got to fine the firm up to 10% of the annual turnover. That's what the Act says.
But you fine them less than 10%. It was between 5 and 7%. So you could have gone up to 10, and you didn't.
You can, yes. You can fine up to 10, but, there's lots of mitigating factors that would, weigh against fining up to 10%. Then there is a civil side. The Act itself empowers, victims of the collusion to claim civil damages.
So you want the poor people who've been robbed to go find a lawyer and go to court. This is the problem again. We are putting the pressure on the wronged and not the pressure on those who did the wrongdoing. Elsie, change the law. You're in Parliament.
Yes, okay. The challenge at the moment is that the very same law societies or associations are still not transformed, because you don't find the black lawyers associations coming together and going for a class act, for instance, in defense of the communities. Why? Because they do not have money to do so.
Could we set up a fund?
Depending on the monies.
set up a fund for poor people to go after people who steal their money, to help
Well, there's
us.
money already that is available. That what is that? The legal aid board money is available
For class
for
action
poor
lawsuits.
people. The money is in the legal board, so you go there, you'll get it, right?
That did not help the victims of Marikana. Let's be frank about that, right? I'm asking about something completely different here. To assist poor people, to say, keep the money here. This money is for specifically situations of corruption, which is becoming endemic in South Africa.
We can establish and reinforce the money within the legal aid board without creating another institution again. And why not do that?
Will you take that suggestion that you made then about ring fencing some money within the legal
Definitely,
aid
it's a
board?
very good suggestion that I think has come out of the debate
All
to
right.
say, for those that are defrauded and corrupted and are victims, why can't we then begin to then say a special amount of money be set aside within the legal, because they've got systems and established.
So there we go. We're going to have some money ring-fenced so that we can go.
No, not yet. I said we'll take the matter forward to the Justice Department.
When we return, a special message from a South African who went into exile after his efforts to counter corruption in the ruling party fell on deaf ears. Don't go away. And welcome back to the big debate on corruption. 15 years ago, Andrew Feinstein was a prominent ANC MP serving on the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament. But he resigned in 2001 when the ANC blocked his efforts to look into corruption in the multi-billion rand arms deal. He continues to call for ANC leaders to be investigated and prosecuted. And he sent us this question via Skype.
I'd like to ask Dr. Ginwala a question about the notorious South African arms deal, which, as most people know, involved literally hundreds of millions of dollars of corrupt payments for weapons that we barely use today. Dr. Ginwala, at the beginning of Parliament's Public Accounts Committee inquiry into the deal, you were very supportive, but once the ANC had developed a party line on the matter, you became not just less supportive, but actually quite obstructive to the committee's work, trying to persuade me to drop the inquiry, convincing me to appear at a press conference to deny the committee's allegations. What I'd like to ask you now, with hindsight, is whether you regret having obstructed the parliamentary investigation into the arms deal, thus undermining the very important constitutional oversight role that Parliament needs to play. Thank you very much.
Let me spell out what actually happened. First of all, the first I heard of what the committee was doing was that all the subcontracts and so on had been given to that committee, and they were not following up on it. When the government asked for them back, I intervened and said, no, we locked them up in a vault, and only the members of SCOPA, this committee, could go in there and look at it. When we wanted the documents back, where did we find them? In the home of one of the people working with Andrew. They then wanted us to ask the president to come and to Parliament. We don't have that power. We can ask any other body, but we cannot subpoena the president to come. So I think we need to know the full facts before we start making allegations. If we have any evidence, which was never presented to Parliament, then we will, at that point, we will make it known. But we never had the evidence.
You know what this looks like to us? Throughout the show so far, you've said that we must act. We must go out of our way as the public to do something. It feels like you weren't the activist back then that you are now.
No. How was I supposed... I could not give Parliament the capacity to investigate. They are not forensic in capacity. I protected the documents from being given back to the government. That was as far as we could go.
Because can I tell you what the perception was, particularly at the time, was that it was because these were your comrades. And it's the perception even now that if somebody is in the right faction of the ANC, then they're never going to be investigated for corruption. And the moment that they are wrong, or they're on the wrong side, then it's free game.
If that's the perception, the point is there is a limit to what a speaker can do. I cannot suddenly give every member of the Public Accounts Committee forensic experience.
There are new allegations. I mean, it's actually getting depressing, buying the newspaper and seeing headlines of president's son linked to dairy farm in the Free State, president's son or president's cousin or whoever it is, or nephew in illegal mining in Mpumalanga. And it doesn't seem to me that there's any energy. There's no energetic rush to go and investigate. Shouldn't we maybe say that anyone who is linked to, so the president's son, let's use him since I've used that example, the president's son should not be allowed to get a tender or be able to go and bid for a mine. Shouldn't we say that?
The mines is a private sector matter.
But government gives them licenses.
We give them licenses, but we don't operate the mines. We don't put money into the mine. It's private money that goes into the digging of the mine. So if you are then saying that our children and our wives and our spouses and partners and brothers should not be involved in government business for so long as I'm in public space, obviously that is a matter that we can look at and let a society lobby for it and agree and
That's
do.
good.
But private business allow everybody that to be in private business.
Let me hear what the audience thinks about that. I think that's good. That's another proposal you'll take. Let me ask again, is this another proposal you're going to take forward?
Okay.
A proposal.
Now, can I leave it that the active citizens of South Africa, together with those who will support you, let's lobby for it that it goes that particular way?
You know, there's something that I've learned from the private sector. Let's take for an example. If Lever Brothers wants to run a competition, there will be a clause that says immediate family members are not supposed to take part in that competition. They were trying to curb instances of corruption in that regard. Why has it taken so long for our government to know 20 years down the line that there are activities of corruption and the state is not yet capacitated?
The term corruption might be something very difficult for some of us to interpret. I can see even here in the studio, some are seated in the leather seats and others are not. That's corruption. I'm coming from an area which is surrounded by mines, Greater Western area. In that area, people continue to loot even today. And those people are part and parcel of our respectable kind of government, member of the African National Congress that we have loved and voted for in 1994, thinking that black people will be emancipated. The gurus of the BEE was family-based. Bekkersdal is known by other people as a suburb. It is the worst that you can find in this country, as poor as we are. Yes. Yes. The sewer system in that township, the township is stinky. You cannot visit me yourself. The goldfields or South Deep mines have developed a trust in 2009 supposing to develop the communities of Greater Western area, including Bekkersdal. To date, people are staying in Sandton there and in Highton in the name of Bekkersdal communities, and we remain poor.
There's this perception that the ANC comrades, it's their time to eat. You know that book from the Kenyan journalist, Time to Eat, and they don't actually care about people. How do you respond to that?
Look, the mining charter has established that whoever mines in South Africa must then develop those trusts. That's what we call social development fund that is also accrued from the profits. And what has been happening, and it is a story that is going around, quite a number of those trust monies have gone in it, but the money is not going out into the communities. So it could be the element of corruption in it there.
In October 2010, Goldfields announced the BEE deal for South Deep. And that turned out to be a donation of about 2 billion rand, a donation. It's the first time I've ever seen a mining deal which is just a donation. You'll see the workers at South Deep. They are made part of a trust, but if you work it out per worker, it's a small amount. Then there's some names here, and they are big, big winners. And one of them is Baleka and Betty. So, what has she got? What has she got to do with South Deep and Goldfields and mining and so on? Now, by the way, in October 2010, I asked to interview Nick Holland, the chief executive of Goldfields, and to this day I'm still waiting. Last year he was paid 45 million rand. 45 million. But now this is the best part. The best part is this. Finally, about 2 months ago, Goldfields announced publicly that it's being investigated by the Securities Exchange Commission based in Washington. Because why? Goldfields is listed in New York. And the SEC, when they look at you, you better be worried because they don't look at civil matters. And Goldfields is just saying nothing. And if you go down onto the ground and say, what did that 2 billion rand BEE deal do for the workers? The answer, if you listen to anyone who's on the ground, will tell you nothing.
When we return, we get the final word from our panel and our audience. You're watching The Big Debate. And welcome back to The Big Debate. Now, are we serious about tackling corruption in South Africa? What do you think?
Our government should look on the procurement processes in the municipalities because that's the first thing that creates a lot of corruption. Go to Tshwane, they are digging everywhere because they know that is how they take out money from the public coffers to perpetuate corruption.
Corruption as a phenomenon is actually a societal issue. It starts at a very basic level when you bribe security to enter a certain complex after visiting hours, when you bribe the traffic cops. These small elements grow and multiply as you go into the state, as you rise in the private sector, and you start doing them there. How do we resolve the issue from the very roots? I think that's something that has never been raised.
I'm asking the official to come to Freedom Park. We have evidence that will show him they are selling our houses. We heard that there is 2 million that was given Freedom Park for skill development. We don't know where is that money. Please come to Freedom Park. We will give you all the evidence. We are not scared of dying. Thank you.
I said in 2005, the former president Thabo Mbeki provided Bekkersdal with the presidential project that worth 1.2 billion for the purpose of developmental dissemination in Bekkersdal. We don't know what happened with that money. We have wrote 2 letters to public protectors. We've got references. The people of Bekkersdal have been protesting for more than 6 months. But yet, we are sick and tired. Our patience got exhausted. We are now ready to govern ourselves. Yeah. And imminently, let me tell you, Bekkersdal imminently is going to be similar to Orania.
The minister was right. Apparently, we didn't give him enough time to explain himself. A lot of people are under investigation in parliament, in other departments. If you were an anti-Zuma pre-Mangaung, you are investigated now. Where we come from with a serious problem, we have a trust that sold our land for 1 rand to build the stadiums. The government came and took the small thing that we have and left us with nothing. We had to go to protest and people came to be paralyzed so that we can have schools back.
Minister of Presidents lapho asuka khona ukuthi i-corruption is it umthetho wabantu abaphezulu ukuthi mabawenze kubantu abaphansi.
Deputy Minister, I think one thing that this debate has showed us is that
the rhetoric that our current leadership has put forward is not flying anymore. I think we are no longer blind. We are not stupid. We know and we can see what is going on. Baba, I just want to ask that when we leave our position, when we finally go home and we retire, and when it comes to your last day, they're not going to bury you with your cars. They're not going to bury you with your money. You know, we had such faith in the ANC. Obaba bethu balwa. They sacrificed, they left us as their children to go and fight. And for us to vote for you, and to have abantwana balale belambile, to have our people not have jobs, this cannot fly. Tina, as the voters, we also have a responsibility. Let us be discerning. Let us make our voices heard through the ballots that we vote for. Thank you.
We, as a nation, we've got no recourse except to make a choice between barbarism and socialism. Capitalism thrives on corruption, and there is no way that we are going to uproot it.
After the break, the final word from our panel. And welcome back to the big debate. Let's hear a last word from our panel here in Johannesburg.
Firstly, I want to ask the media. You devote a lot of space when A, B, C are corrupt. But when measures are being taken, for example, I mentioned the Treasury list, investigate those companies, give people the information so that they can act. When Parliament first introduced the code, declaration of your assets, it used to be published in full every year. Nobody pays attention to it now. Why? Why are all of you not asking for that? You'll at least have the information. If somebody's got a lot of cars, they have to declare them. But the executive never publishes its executive declaration of assets. So let us now ask the executive members to publish the results of the executive code. And I welcome what happened here today, because I think it was important. But if people don't listen, you've got to make them listen. Not just destroying schools or clinics and demonstrating, but make them listen and engage them directly. Thanks.
Siki, I hear what Fini's saying, and I couldn't agree more about the media. I mean, my issue with the media is that we have a misalignment. And I, for example, would like to interview Stephen Kosef, the Chief Executive of Investec, and just say, Mr. Kosef, please, come out of the shadows. I want to speak to you on the public record. But he won't do it. Now, he's not the Queen of England, I don't believe. But he won't do it. Nick Holland at Goldfields, please come out of the shadows. We'd like to interview you. In the public sector, it's a very different thing. There are ways of getting information, and that is where the media has an obsession. And the main reason for that is that certain people in the media, and the majority, more than half, are manipulated by the private sector. So we need a rebirth of honesty in the media. We need a rebirth of honesty in law enforcement, the SAPS, the NPA, the Hawks, and the courts. Most important of all, we need a rebirth of honesty at the level of the ruling party. Please do it.
Today's debate has been quite useful, and it's very sobering, in particular, to listen to people who experience corruption and collusion on a daily basis. My suggestion, and I'm not saying that this doesn't happen, is that firstly we need a very strong political will to take corruption and collusion very seriously in this country. We need very strong institutions, independent institutions, accountable institutions that are not just accountable to government, but also accountable to citizens as well.
Bongi?
I think that what we have witnessed here, and we also see it in the service delivery protest, is that people are outraged, that people can't take it anymore. And we are also seeing that trust has been eroded. In fact, it is the biggest cost of corruption. It's not just the loss of money, but when the public can no longer trust those who manage and distribute public resources, I think that we should care even more as a society. We should ask ourselves deeper questions about where we are going, because a society that has no basic essential trust in its own government cannot succeed.
Thank you. Final word.
No, thank you very much. The inputs and the comments made by the people have been heard, and indeed they are pointed towards the issue of corruption. That even if when we say we deal with corruption as government, the toughness in dealing with those people who are corrupt will come out as very weak. And then that is why we slap people on the ribs and we don't really give long sentences and then tough measures. And I think the other recommendations that came is for us then to begin to help the poor, because corruption hits the poor most. And that when those proceeds of corruption and crime comes, we need to have that particular funding mechanism that can assist them to use the laws that are there in the country and not be dependent that they must then rise on their own. But obviously, we have heard you, and then we'll take the matters forward. And on the one of Tshwane, definitely there are issues that needs to be followed up for investigation, and then we'll then take them to the appropriate organization. But we'll make sure, therefore, that we sit on them as the presidency to make sure that something happens to resolve on the issue. Thank you.
Do you want to say something? Do you want to say something about the lack of trust?
With all the laws, I mean, currently, even when you put statistics and you say there are 900 cases that are under investigation on corruption, people, because they don't see the results, they will then doubt as to whether these cases will be ever finalized, or if finalized, whether these people will be sentenced and then there will be tougher action. Secondly, I think we spoke about the political will and the drive and the leadership that must really be bold enough to say enough is enough, and let's then begin. I think there's a call for that which is lacking, and I think everyone has expressed on the issue, that let's then hold each other's hands as South Africa and save South Africa from corruption.
All right, thank you. To be part of the big debate, don't forget to like our page on Facebook, and you can also follow us on Twitter. South Africans have become used to daily stories of large-scale corruption and theft of public money. Is government finally getting serious about tackling the problem? Or are our leaders just making the right noises whilst they themselves join the gravy train? You decide. Thank you for watching The Big Debate. Goodbye.